the minor signs of the Day of Judgment. We talked about the first sign, which was the passing away of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from our eyes. And he sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that his death would be the first sign of the Day of Judgment. He then said that the victory of Baytul Maqdis will also be a sign, and that happened. Can anybody remember what Hijr that happened in? Anybody? 16. That's right, 16 of Hijr. Couple of years into the Khilafah of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, the Baytul Maqdis keys were handed over to Amirul Mu'mineen, and then it remained in the Muslim hands until 492 al-Hijr, when the Christian crusaders basically terrorized the area and took over the land until 583 al-Hijr, when Hazrat Salahuddin Ayyubi rahimahumullah then took the keys back. And then in the early 20th century, when the British gave the mandate to the Zionist regime, and that's been going on for over 70 years, and if Allah wills, and inshallah Allah will, that the victory will be upon the Muslims towards the end of time. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in the hadith by Sayyidina Abu Hurairah, which we started yesterday, radiallahu ta'ala an, narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the hour will not be established until two big groups fight amongst each other, whereupon there will be a great number of casualties on both sides, and they will be following one of the same religious doctrine. So what that basically means is that two Muslim large groups will fight, there will be a misunderstanding amongst them, and there will be a lot of death. However, they will won't be fighting each other because of Aqidah reasons. They won't be fighting because one group is, and which will happen later in the time of Sayyidina Ali, including the time of Ali. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wasn't mentioning that, the fighting against the Khawarij. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that later. But he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that two groups will be on the same religious doctrine, and that is referred to the battle of Siffin with Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala and Hazrat Amir Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhum. And both of them fought against each other due to a misunderstanding of qiyas and a misunderstanding of the ruling. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, however, mention that one of the two groups will be the correct one, and he referred to the group of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala and this goes back to the Hazrat Ammar bin Yasir radiallahu ta'ala an. Hazrat Ammar radiallahu ta'ala an was one of the early adopters of Islam. His mother and father were both brutally murdered by the Quraysh. Hazrat Sumayya was one of the first person who gained Shahada, and he was working on the wall, the construction of the wall of Masjid Nabawi Sharif. And when the masjid was being built, Hazrat Ammar radiallahu was conscious, and the wall fell on him. When the wall fell on him, the Sahaba thought that he had passed away, and they came with the news to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Ammar has not passed away. Ammar will not die until he takes the sword and fights amongst the two groups, and he will be on the side of the right group. And Hazrat Ammar radiallahu ta'ala at the age of 90 fought with Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala against the people of Hazrat Amir Muawiyah, and Hazrat Ammar was martyred in that battle, giving proof that Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala was correct in that misunderstanding. However, as believers, what we don't do is we do not take sides in the sense of which Sahabi to curse, because as far as we're concerned, Ahl Sunnah, we curse no Sahabi. We respect every single companion. We are not like the Shia who curse Hazrat Amir Muawiyah, who cursed the mother of the believers, Hazrat Aisha radiallahu ta'ala, who cursed the Amir al-Mu'mineen, Hazrat Abu Bakr, Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala. We are not like that. We take a step back and we say it was a misunderstanding, and we respect both sides. And this is the believer. And because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said many hadith, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam talked about the hadith of the 73 factions that will happen amongst the believers, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said the Jews had 71 factions out of one group was correct and 70 were wrong. The Christians had 72 factions, out of which one group and 72 were wrong. And he then said, my ummah will split into 73 factions, out of which 72 will go into the kulluhum fin nar illa wahida. Every one of them will go into the hellfire except for one. The Sahaba Kiram radiallahu ta'ala, at that point, they weren't concerned about the 72, they were just concerned about the one. So they said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, mal wahida, which is the one? He sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, ma alayni wa ashabi, those who are on my path and the path of my companions. So here he reflects on every single companion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran al-Kareem, radiyallahu anhum wa radwan. Allah is pleased with all of them and they are pleased with him. He didn't single anyone out. And then when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, how do we stay on the straight path? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, ashabika nujum fa bi ayyihim ihtadaytum ihtadaytum. My companions are like stars. Whichever one you will follow, you will be guided by them. So he sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that do not make them a target after me, i.e. the companions. And that is why Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'at will remain quiet and will respect every single companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam then continues with the as narrated by Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, and he says that afflictions will appear. There will be a lot of killings, a lot of increase in killings. Today killings are not even counted. We've got 20,000 children martyred in Gaza alone. Children. This is something that wasn't ever a part of war. Never has been. And yet today it's been just taken for granted. 20 more thousand children are missing. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect them. And then he said, until the wealth is in abundance, so abundant that a wealthy person will worry lest nobody should accept his zakat. And whenever he will present it to someone, that person to whom he will be offered will say, I am not in need of it. Now, does anyone have any idea how much zakat is actually given by the Muslims on an annual basis? There's a think tank in America who've done some research, and does anybody want to just take a guess? It's in its billions, okay? Anyone want to take a guess? 10 billion? 30 billion? Billion, did he say, or million? Billion, okay. The think tank says anything between 500 billion to $1 trillion is given in zakat every year by the Muslim Ummah. So just think of how much wealth the Muslim Ummah has attained to give that much zakat. So just to go on to it, and he sallallahu alaihi wasallam then until the people, he then says, until the Qiyamah will not appear until the people compete with one another in constructing high buildings. We see that with our own eyes today. Dubai has got the tallest building. Saudi have just announced they are going to be a bigger building than that. Dubai have come back and said, we're going to create another taller building than that. This is prophesied by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when the Sahaba were living in mud huts. Okay, and he sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that this will happen in time. He then said that when a man passes by a grave, and he will say, would that I were in his place. In other words, it is so hard to protect the iman now that I wish I was in his place, i.e. I was passed away. He then sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, until the sun rises from the west, which is one of the biggest signs of the day of judgment. But each sign has its own detail. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, talking about the abundance of wealth, he said that Abu Hurairah narrates in a hadith related by Imam Muslim rahimahumullah. Abu Hurairah narrates that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the earth will vomit long pieces of its liver. In other words, the wealth will come out of the earth. It will vomit its liver. What happens when something vomits? It comes out uncontrollable. He says it will vomit its gold and silver. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what's black gold? It's oil. Okay, and this was prophesied 1400 years ago. And he then sallallahu alaihi wasallam will further say this. And he sallallahu alaihi wasallam says the murderer will come out, and the murderer will say, it was for this that I committed murder. It was for this, i.e. the oil, the blood, the gold and the silver that the earth will vomit out, it was for this that I committed murder. The breaker of family ties will come and say, it was for this that I broke family ties. And the thief will come out and say, it is for this that my hands were cut off. And yet, they will then leave it and will not take anything from it. What does that mean? They will then leave it and will not take anything from it. It means they will not benefit from it. They will not benefit from it. And he sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about the wealth in such detail that the ulama have written that in the first era, it happened straight after the Khilafat of Uthman radiallahu ta'ala, when people couldn't find anyone to give zakat to. At the moment, there's plenty of people who can take zakat, but another time towards the end will come again. Hazrat Adi ibn Hatim radiallahu ta'ala narrates that while I was with the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the city, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a man came and complained to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam of destitution and poverty. Because in them times, people were finding it difficult. The Sahaba used to open their fast by cutting a date into 3 or 4 pieces. And that was it. That was their iftar. That was their suhoor. Even today we hear stories of children in Gaza who say, will my fast be accepted because I've got nothing to open it with in iftar? This is the sadness of, and look at the luxury on, just go home today and look at the table that has been set for us. Then another man came and he complained of robbery. The Prophet ﷺ said, Adi, i.e. to the narrator, have you been to Al-Hira? Adi said, I haven't been to it, but I was informed about it. He ﷺ said, if you should live a long time, you will certainly see that a lady in a hawdah traveling from Al-Hira will safely reach Makkah and perform the tawaf of the Kaaba, fearing none but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, i.e. the roads will become so safe that a woman will be able to travel alone. And that's what's happening today. Women are traveling alone without any fear whatsoever, although the Sharia commands that they should have a mahram. Even the authorities in Saudi have taken the ruling away that they need a mahram to complete the Umrah or their Hajj. I said to myself, what will happen to the robbers of the tribe of Tai who have spread evil throughout the country? I.e., Hazrat Adi asks the Prophet. The Prophet ﷺ further said, you should live long enough, the treasures of Khusro will be opened and taken as spoils. I said, you mean Khusro, the son of Hormuz, i.e. in Iran and in the West. He said, Khusro, the son of Hormuz. And if you should live long enough, you will see that one will carry a handful of gold or silver and go out looking for a person to accept it from him, i.e. as in sadaqah, as in zakat, but will find none to accept it from him. And any of you, when meeting Allah, will meet him without need of an interpreter, i.e. Allah will address you directly. On the Day of Judgment, Allah will address every one of us directly. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, didn't I send a messenger to teach you? Challenging us as to why did you go astray? Allah will then say, and didn't I give you wealth and do you favors? The person will say yes. Then he will look to his right and he will look to his left, but he will see nothing but the hellfire. May Allah protect us. So from this we understand that the wealth has become so much. And we see that today. There was just a story a couple of years back that a man from Saudi Arabia wanted to buy 2 aeroplanes for his son, for his birthday. Model aeroplanes. And 2 Boeing 747s turned up. 2 Boeing 747s turned up because by mistake he ordered 2 real aeroplanes. Didn't even realize how much he was paying for them. It just was a transaction. That's how much wealth. How much wealth? Today, the Emiratis, when they want something, I was speaking to a person who worked for one of the royal family, and they were telling me, when they want something, they say to us, don't mention money. Just go and do it. Whatever money, whatever it is, it's going to cost. We've got the money, just go and do it. That's the scenario on one side. And then verily, in the same Arab world, we have people who have nothing to eat the iftar. That's the way, and there is a hadith, inshallah, we'll go through that later on. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that there will be so much fitan. There will be so much fitan. And it is, Does anyone know which Sahabi specifically narrated about many fitna? Anybody know his name? Remember his name, Hazrat Hudhayfa bin al-Yaman. Hazrat Hudhayfa radiallahu ta'ala, you've heard the name Hazrat Hudhayfa. Hazrat Umar used to say that I used to watch Hazrat Hudhayfa and follow him. And if there was a death and he attended the namaz-e-janazah, I would attend, because I know that that person is not a hypocrite. Because Hazrat Hudhayfa was told by the Prophet of every single hypocrite's name. If he did not attend a janazah, I wouldn't attend a janazah either. Hazrat Hudhayfa radiallahu ta'ala says that when people used to ask Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam about the good times, I always used to ask him about the bad times, so that I could protect myself from them. I said, Ya Rasulullah, we were in the midst of ignorance and evil, and Allah brought us this good. In other words, before the Jahiliyyah, before the time of Rasulullah, the term Jahiliyyah, the land where people used to bury their daughters, where the oppressed used to go, where the oppressor were being oppressed by the women and the children were being oppressed, the orphans had their wealth taken off them because no one had defended. All these things were happening. No one had any rights, bar the rich and the famous. Seems a bit like today, really, doesn't it? And therefore this was happening, and the Rasul, Allah sent the Prophet. So he says, will there be a bad time after this good one? And in other words, it's so good. Hazrat Hudhayfa is saying, obviously, that Islam was cherishing in Medina, people were showing respect and love for each other, no one cared about wealth. Everyone, if there was a trader that they went to, someone went to buy from a trader, if he had done his day's sale, he used to say, go and see my brother over there, buy off him. He hasn't done his day's sale. Today, we'll copy him and take anything off him so that our business can get better. And that was the time in Medina. And he said, will there be a bad time after this good time? He sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there will be a good time. He said, yes. So he then asked, will there be a good time after the bad time? And he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, yes, but there will be a hidden evil. In other words, there will be a good time at the time of the Prophet. And that was the time of the companions and after the first 3 generations of Muslims. Although there was fitna there, i.e. the battle of Siffin and the Khawarij, etc. And then the bad time, then leaders came who started to rule over the Muslims and oppress over the Muslims. And then good times came, i.e. Muslims became wealthy. You'd think that if there was wealth in the Muslim Ummah, there would be no issues, there would be no problems. But they became so greedy that, and then the Prophet expands on this in a minute. And he says that, yes, what will be the evil hidden therein? Hazrat Hudhayfa asked the question. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, that time will witness the rise of the people who will adopt ways other than mine. In other words, the fitna will be that they will adopt ways other than the sunnah. They will go against the sunnah. And there will be people, and I asked, will there be a bad time after that good one? He sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, yes, there will be people standing and inviting in the gates of hell. So how do you think that is? Standing and inviting the gates of hell. Basically, there will be so much fitna in Aqidah that people will call people astray from the true Aqidah onto the wrong Aqidah and taking them into the hellfire. And this is what will happen. And whosoever responds to their call, they will be thrown into the hellfire. I said, Ya Rasulullah, describe them for us. He said, there will be people having the same complexion as ours. I.e., there will be the people and they will be speaking our language. So he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, it will be from the Arabs that the fitna of Aqidah will start. And we'll talk about the fitna of al-Wahhabiyya later on, where it came from and how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had already told us about it. I said, Ya Rasulullah, what do you suggest if I happen to live in that time? He sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you should stick to the main body of the Muslims, i.e. whatever the Muslims have believed from the time of the companions up to now, stick to that main body. Allama Shami writes, it's not about who the main people of the followers are at the time. It's about what the main Aqidah has been from the day of the Prophet up to now, and what the ulama have written all the time up to then. That chain, stay with that chain of Aqidah. Stay with that one Aqidah and you will remain steadfast. And he sallallahu and their leader. I said, what if they have no such thing? I.e., there's no leader. Look at the question that Hazrat Hudhayfa is asking. There is no leader today. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there's no main body and have no leader. He said, separate yourselves from these factions. Though you may have to eat the roots of the trees, you might have to go into the outskirts, into the jungles or in the mountains until death do you, and you are in this state. Narrated in a rigorously authentic hadith by Hazrat Hudhayfa radiallahu ta'ala an. So from this we can understand that the fitna will become so big, and he sallallahu alaihi wasallam will continue. And there are many different hadith talking about the trials and the tribulations. And the hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says he came outside and he said, I can see the fitna coming into your houses as the raindrops are falling on your rooftops. And this is the fitna. Every single household will not be free from fitna, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. So don't think things are going to get easier. Things are going to get worse. And we see that in our generations. Our elders didn't see the fitness that we see today. We, as in us, as we can call ourselves a bit of the elders now, we are seeing new fitna that we never thought of 20, 30 years ago. And we are seeing that. We are seeing this in this world that we are happening today. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had told us everything about them. And people will commit major sins. And here, Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala narrates a hadith. I just want to make sure that I've got enough time because we're going to go into the fitna of the Khawarij, inshallah, probably next week. But we'll touch on the hadith. Umar radiallahu ta'ala reported that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, saying with his face towards the east direction. East direction from Mecca is towards Riyadh, known as Najd. Okay? And why do I say that? Is because Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam then clearly states those words later on in another hadith. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that behold, turmoil will appear from this side. So we see a lot of fitna coming from the west, but the Prophet is pointing towards Riyadh, Najd, and he said turmoil will come from this side, where the qarn of shaitan will come. Qarn shaitan, the horns of shaitan will appear. So Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala also talks to the people of Iraq, because later on the people of Iraq were abstaining from small sins. And he says, there's an irony to this. You abstain from small sins and you committed major sins, i.e. the martyrdom of Hazrat Imam Hussein radiallahu ta'ala was done by those people. And this continues. And he sallallahu alayhi wasallam talks about another hadith narrated by Hazrat Hudhayfa, again the Apostle of Allah, where he asked, Ya Rasulullah, will there be an evil as it was before, after this good with which Allah has bestowed upon us? A bit of another hadith relating to the previous hadith. I asked, where does the protection from it lie? He sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, in the sword. In other words, you're going to have to fight. That is the way protection will be. I asked, what will happen then? He replied, a time will come when there will be summoners out of the gates of hell. I know the people will call you towards them. What will then happen? He replied, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that if Allah has in the earth a Khalif who flays your back and takes your property, obey him. Still obey him. Right? And otherwise die holding on the stump of the tree. I asked, what will come after that? The Prophet ﷺ said, the fitna of Dajjal will then come after that. And then the major signs will come after this. The Prophet ﷺ, later on, there was a fitna at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Remember we talk about Yazid ibn Muawiyah? Yazid ibn Muawiyah, how he started to astray from the Sunnah, i.e. the martyrdom of Imam Hussein. We're not in that position to talk about it today, but the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, etc. was done at the time, and later on people then, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and even in the time of Hazrat Amir Muawiyah, fitna had occurred, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that my khilafah will last for 30 years. My khilafah, the true Khulafai Rashidin. Because Rasulullah in another hadith, when he was asked, he says, Alaykum bi sunnati wa sunnati Khulafai Rashidin. Stay upon my way and the way of my Khulafai Rashidin. Meaning the Khalifs, the 4 Khalifs and Imam Hassan. Lasted 30 years. After that, it became rulers. And then kingdoms. And then we see that today, dictatorships. This is when the Khilafah. And then Khalif will return when Imam Mahdi returns. So from this we understand that how do we protect ourselves? And how do we stay? And then what was the door to fitna? Does anybody remember from the seerah's lessons? What was the door that was protecting the fitna? Does anybody remember? We've all ate for a whole year, Maulana Sahib. Okay, let me remind you. Hazrat Hudayfa said, there's another hadith. O Amirul Mu'mineen, Hudayfa reports that one day in the company of Sayyidina Umar, that he said, who amongst us has preserved in his mind most perfectly the hadith of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in regard to the turmoil that he has told us about? He said, you are bold enough to make this claim, and be further said. How? In other words, the Amir al-Mu'minin said to Hudayfa, you're bold to take the claim, tell me how. He said, I heard Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say that there would first be turmoil for a one in his family, his property, his self, his children, his neighbors, and the sins committed in their connection would be expiated by fasting, by prayer. In other words, those fitnas that happens in the home will be overcome. Why? By praying salah, by giving zakat, by fasting, by performing tawbah, enjoining good and forbidding evil. Thereupon Umar radiallahu anhu, I do not mean that turmoil on that small scale. But what about the one which would emerge like the mounting wave of the ocean? I said, Amirul Mu'mineen, you have nothing to do with it, for the door is closed between you and that. He said, what door would the door be broken, or will it be opened? The door that will open the door of fitna, i.e. the oceans will come. I said, no, it will be broken. Thereupon he said, then it would not be to be closed despite your best efforts. We said to Hudayfa, did Umar know the door? So after the companions are saying, as Umar went, did he know the door? He knows the night preceding the next day, just as one knows the night preceding the next day. Hazrat Hudayfa says, yes, that's how he knew it. He says, then he says, I narrated to him something in which there was nothing fabricated. Shaqiq, one of the narrators, said, we did not dare ask Hudayfa about the door. We were so scared. We didn't ask. So we requested Masruq, one of the other companions, to ask him. And he said, so he asked him. And he, radiallahu ta'ala, and said, the door is Umar ibn al-Khattab. The door is Umar and it will be broken, i.e. he will be martyred. And when he was martyred, until then, in the time of Umar, there was no fitna. Everything was dealt with by Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an. And then the fitna happened at the time of Hazrat Uthman radiallahu ta'ala an. The first 6 years, as we've heard in his and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had already predicted and prophesied that. He talked about how Hazrat Uthman will be martyred. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam has mentioned that in one hadith. Sayyidina Ali said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sat and Hazrat Abu Bakr came and he said, let him in. Hazrat Abu Bakr sat next to him. And then Hazrat Umar came and he said, let him in. After a short while, we let Hazrat Umar in. And then Hazrat Uthman came. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam waited for a while and he says, let him in, for this has a prophet and 3 martyrs on it. I.e. meaning this. But Hazrat Uthman didn't find any space to sit next to the Prophet. So he sat further away. The ulama say that was a sign that the Prophet will be buried with Hazrat Abu Bakr and Hazrat Umar, and Hazrat Uthman will be buried further away. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from all these fitnas. But the fitnas are going to come, and they are coming. The battle of Jamal, the battle of Siffin. What's happened? The battle of Jamal, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we've said, this incident happened after the martyrdom of Hazrat Uthman. What happened? Groups started to split. Okay, the martyrdom of Uthman. So one group, including Hazrat Aisha, Hazrat Talha, Hazrat Zubair, radiallahu ta'ala anhum. These are senior companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam were on one side, and Hazrat Ali was on the other side. Okay? And there wasn't supposed to, but what was the discussion? The discussion was, should we take revenge on the martyrdom of Hazrat Uthman? And Hazrat Ali said, we don't know for sure who was the actual murderer. So therefore, how can we take it? Hazrat Ali was a man of peace when he needed to be amongst the Muslims. And Hazrat Aisha and Hazrat Talha, Hazrat Zubayr said, we must take. So Hazrat Muawiyah took that side. Now what happened here was then the group split. What happened? There were those who hated Hazrat Uthman, those who hated Sayyidina Ali, known as the Khawarij. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes into detail, but we haven't got enough time today. We'll talk about the Khawarij inshallah next week and exactly what signs they had. And a lot of them will make sense to you. And then there was one side who became so involved and so in love with Sayyidina Ali that they hated the companions, which were the Shias and the Rafidis, who started to curse the companions. So, and up to a certain sect amongst them are started to believe that Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala was the messenger, but he was given to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam by mistake. There's a group amongst the Shias who believe that. There's another group amongst the Shias who say that there was 40 chapters in the Quran, but 10 of them were taken by the Sunnis because they were in praise of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala. So you've got these people who have such belief that they curse the companions. And the Khawarij, they're the ones who wanted to murder Sayyidina Ali and did so. And that's why when Maulana talks about, no one knows for sure where Hazrat Ali's body is buried. It is potentially in Najaf. But there is also a narration that he was put on a camel, and the camel was just to go where it went. And then wherever it stopped, some people buried him. Why? Because the Khawarij wanted to cut the body of Sayyidina Ali up. They accused Sayyidina Ali of shirk. This is nothing new when the Muslims are being accused of shirk. They accused Sayyidina Ali of shirk. They accused that he didn't understand the Quran. They accused, and they were the ones that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the Quran will not go beyond their throat. But we'll talk more about inshallah, about those in detail inshallah, if Allah wills, next week. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us inshallah, and we'll talk about what exactly the words of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam were and how we should protect ourselves. Wa akhiru da'wana aqulu qawli hadha astaghfirullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.